Hey, what's up guys, Pablo Munoz here. I just released a brand new set of brushes for detailing in ZBrush called the Bark and Wood Texturing or Detailing Brushes. So this tutorial is more of an overview showing you how the brushes work, the type of patterns and effects that you can achieve. Fairly simple with these brushes. It's a lot of fun, so let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Alright, so here we are in ZBrush. I'm currently using a custom UI. If you're interested in building your own UI or you want to download this specific UI that I'm using, I'm going to put a link so that you can go to that tutorial where I cover how to do that and how to download the current UI that I have. I'm also using ZBrush 2022.0.5, and this is the latest version or the last version of free updates from ZBrush, but these brushes work with 2023 and 2024 as well. Now, these are the icons of all the brushes, and as you can see, there's a ton of brushes here. There are about 115 brushes that you can download. And yeah, they're a lot of fun. A lot of them are very similar. They're just variations of kind of like the same purpose. But again, I'm going to cover this in just a bit. Now, before we get started, I just want to mention that although these brushes have a very specific purpose, like, creating wood and bark patterns, I've been using them for, different organic detailing purposes. So for instance, a lot of creature work. Let me just show you some of the stuff that I've been working on. So this is pure ref. This is one of the concepts that I created, kind of like a lava bark wood girl type of thing. But this is basically the model in ZBrush, and it has been detailed entirely with those brushes. Here's the final render, the final concept. So as you can see, there's a lot of details here, but they're fairly simple to achieve with these brushes. Now, here is one of my favorite concepts that I created for this series. So the same thing, the same idea is just a fairly simple base model. Obviously, it has a bunch of tubes and I would say horns or roots coming out of it, creating this sort of armor thing. But all the details, all the surface quality that you can see in this character has been detailed entirely with these brushes. So let me just show you an example of that. Going back here into ZBrush. So here we go. So this is the base model that I use. Again, it's fairly simple. I'm going to go into solo mode. So I just have the body and the head in one subtool. Obviously, I sculpted asymmetrically because that was the whole point of my exercise here. And then I have this mesh, right? Or this other subtool that has all the tubes and all these horns, right? They're very, very simple. I have subdivision levels. So if I go to the lowest subdivision, you see they're fairly simple. You can achieve this either with C-spheres or tube brushes, that sort of thing. And obviously, tweak them a little bit as well. But anyway, the reason I'm showing you this is because this is as far as I went in terms of defining the secondary shapes or the secondary forms. So I would say this is my base model or my base mesh. And from that, I went into detailing. And here is the final model that I use for the render. This actually has polypaint. So let me just show you. It's pretty close to the concept, to the final concept. Obviously, I exported this and rendered this out, but you'll see, is there, right? So I'm going to turn off polypaint, go back to basic, and let me go closer here. So you see all of these very intricate detail in this amount of detail. That's fairly simple to create. I know it might look a little bit complex, but once you have established your primary and your secondary shapes and you're happy with those are the most important steps. The detailing, like I've always said in my live streams and other tutorials, is the easiest thing to do in ZBrush, and these brushes will help you to achieve something that looks very complex and very intricate, fairly simple. But the most important things are your primary and secondary shapes. So if you manage to have those working, anything that you add in terms of details will work as well. So anyway, I just want to mention this because, like I said, with this type of brushes or any other brush pack that I have available, creating these details become a simple task. It's just about creating those or having those secondary shapes in order so that everything works fine. All right, so as you can see, these brushes can be used in a bunch of different scenarios, not just for creating a log of wood, which is what I'm going to show you in this tutorial. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the base mesh. And I'm going to go ahead and click on a C-sphere. And I'm going to start here. And I'm going to make sure that I have the draw selected. And I'm going to click and drag like so. And I'm going to use the move tool here. And this is basically to create the length of, a piece of wood or a log of wood. And then we're going to tweak the rest. But that's pretty much it, right? This is how you start. Let's go ahead and click on draw. And I'm going to click on somewhere here around in the middle. That creates another C-sphere. And I'm going to click and drag from that C-sphere just to create a kind of like a knot. I think that will work fine. Maybe something bit bigger. So clicking on scale, pushing that out. Let's click on draw again. And let's go ahead and add another one in here and click and drag. So this is going to be probably how the tree will split, maybe. Let's go ahead and click on draw again, and I'm going to click and drag another one. So you can create any shape you want. I'm just using C-sphere because I think it's, for these more sort of complex shapes, is very, very simple. And let's go ahead and give this a bit of a curvature, not too much. And I think that should be okay. Right? Like I said, you can do more than this. This is just a quick example of how I would approach, a complex shape like an armature like this with C-spheres. And then once we have the base mesh, we're going to be able to detail those. Like I said, fairly simple with the brushes. You see, this tutorial is not going to take that long after I finish with this setup. All right, so let's go to the adaptive skin. I'm going to make sure that the Dynamesh resolution is set to 0. Just because I want to be able to produce a low resolution mesh. So just like that. And then we'll probably do a series mesh, but I want to make sure I have a simple base mesh. All right, so I'm going to click on make adaptive skin. Let's go here. And we are ready to start. All right, so here is our simple mesh. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the move brush to adjust things a little bit. So I'm going to start pushing things. Maybe I want to go to the brush palette, go to curve, click on AccuCurve. So that way we have a more pointy effect. Right, I'm also going to use the smooth brush to smooth things out. This is a pretty strong brush, so I'm going to press spacebar, hold shift to access the properties of the smooth brush and reduce the intensity, the Z intensity, and that way we have a bit more control over the shapes. All right, so I'm going to push this angle a little bit more so that it's thicker at the bottom. And I'm not using any reference. Maybe I should be using reference, but this is just to cover the process of how I would approach something like that. But, if you want to create something a bit more realistic than what I'm doing, using references is always a good idea. All right, so this is the base, but we're going to go ahead and edit this a little bit more and make it more interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this mesh into a Dynamesh. But before that, I'm going to click on Unify just to make sure that it is using the right sort of size for ZBrush. And by the way, this unified would be on your deformation palette, unified, this one right here. Okay. Now I'm gonna click on Dynamesh, and because I have subdivision levels, I'm gonna get this pop-up. So when I click on No, and there we go. So it is it's a decent amount of polygons for what we need. All right. So now I'm gonna take my knife cut, this one right here. By the way, you can access those by holding Control and Shift, click on the thumbnail, on the brush thumbnail, and selecting it from here. So again, holding Control and Shift, I'm going to click and drag, and let's say this is being cut by a saw or something. So it's going to be pretty flat in there. I'll do the same thing for the bottom, like so. And for the top of this asset, I'm going to do something a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to click on the brush thumbnail, and I'm going to look for snake hook brush, and I'm going to click OK. So it's just a simple pop-up saying that this brush works a little bit better with Sculptris Pro. So fair enough, let's go ahead and enable it. So this one right here, and for you would be under the stroke palette, Sculptris Pro. This is the icon that I just enabled. So when Sculptris Pro is enabled, you see that the cursor changes to this purple color. That means that you can do these sort of things, and ZBrush will change the topology or update the topology as you move it along, right? So let's undo that, because what I want to do is edit this brush. I'm going to double click these arrows here to open up the left tray, and from the alpha palette, if you click on this icon here at the top left, you can drop that in there. All right. Now, in the alpha thumbnail, I'm going to select something like the alpha 07. I think this one will be okay. I'm going to click on that. So now, when I push, you'll see that I'm not, creating a very long sort of effect or pushing the geometry for too long, because I'm using this alpha to restrict the areas that this brush is going to affect. So this is a pretty cool trick, because basically the areas that have white, those are the areas that I'm going to push, and anything else is going to be left behind. So this is how you can create, maybe with a smaller brush size, you can start pushing things like that and create more like a crack on the wood. So I'm doing this from different angles, and you'll see how easily we're going to start to create something that's a bit more complex. Maybe reduce the brush size even more, just to add a bit more geometry. Okay, so that's pretty good, right? It's kind of like where the tree sort of like cracked, or it got rotten or something inside. And this will be fine for what we're going to be doing next. All right, so let's go ahead and revert this back to what we had before, so no alpha. And I'm going to try to push from the center inward. So this is going to hollow out the tree a bit more. So far, these are kind of like sculpting tips and tricks and techniques. I haven't started with the actual brushes, but that's kind of like the tutorial part of this video before we get into the overview. All right, so I think you get the idea, right? You can just spend a bit more time doing this, but I think it works. So now that we have this, I'm going to go ahead and also maybe smooth out these edges a bit. I still have the Sculptris Pro enabled. So as I do this, I'm also adding geometry in these areas. I think this one is okay as it is. This is going to be more like a knot than anything. And let's go ahead and turn off Sculptris Pro. I'm going to switch to the Move brush, and also holding the Smooth brush, or the Shift key, sorry, to access the Smooth brush. I'm going to simplify this because I don't want to see these faceted polygons just for a bit, so that we have something a bit cleaner to work with. But this is essentially the asset, right? Obviously, right now, this is still a Dynamesh object, right? So it's not the cleanest topology. I can go ahead and re-Dynamesh again, and the brushes would work just fine with Dynamesh. However, if you have subdivision levels, that's kind of like a better way to add this type of details. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. So I'm going to click on duplicate. So I have two subtools that are exactly the same. The first one I'm going to call it sketch for your reference, and the second one, let's call it subdiv. All right, so with the subdiv, what I need to do, let's go into solo mode and let's collapse this. I want to click on the series measure, which I have here, but I'm just going to give you the settings that I'm going to use from the geometry palette. Let's open up the series measure. So I'm going to make sure that I think 5,000 polygons is fine. So this target polygon count is in the thousands. So 5 is 5,000. So I think that should be okay. Yeah, let's go for maybe 4,000. All right. The rest is going to be exactly the same. I'm not going to touch any of the settings. So it's going to be pretty much the default settings. You can change the target polygon count depending on how complex or how many polygons you want in your mesh. All right, let's turn on polyframe so that you can see what the result looks like. And let's click on series measure. There we go. So not too bad. It actually created a fairly simple mesh here. Some of these areas need a little bit of work just to remove some of these details, but that's, again, something simple to do. I can use the select lasso to hide these polygons. And then let's go ahead and go to the modify topology, delete hidden, and I'm also going to use the close hole feature just to close any area that might have a hole. And at this point, we can just go ahead and remesh again, but I think I need more polygons, so I want to set it back to 5,000. I think that was the original idea anyway. All right, so I think this area that is pretty complex did a pretty good job. I'm going to use the inflate brush to add more thickness to this area, BIN, to access the inflate brush, just a tiny bit. And the rest looks pretty good. All right, so now I'm going to recover some of the details that I had, even though I'm going to create my own details. But I want to cover this process in case you spend a lot of time on a sketch and then you want to recover all those details. So with the subtool, with the subdivision selected and the sketch also visible, remember I'm in solo mode, you can turn this on and off, it doesn't matter, as long as they're both visible. I want to go ahead and click on project. And this project would be under the subtool subpalette, this one right here. So I'm going to click on project, and you see it is projecting the details of the original mesh into this one. There's something going on here. Let me just check what this is. It's an extra stranded polygon in there. All right, so I'm going to delete that as well. There we go. But yeah, you basically can recover all of those details. Now, if you want to see more of those details, you need to obviously add more resolution. So in the subdiv, let's go ahead and click on divide, and let's project again, divide, project again, divide, project again. Okay, so that's not too bad. Let's go ahead and hide the sketch, and we can concentrate on this subdivision. Let's change the material to basic. So what I'm going to do is maybe smooth this out a little bit. Like I said, we recover some of those details in here, but we're going to use the brushes pack to actually generate those details. Okay, so let's smooth this out. You can also use the deformation palette, by the way. Let's go to deformation. You can use something like polish. Might be a little bit too strong. That's all right. If you're starting to smooth things and you don't see the effect straight away, what I would recommend is to use the Smooth Stronger. So I have it already in my custom palette here, Smooth Stronger, but this one comes with ZBrush, so you can load it from the Lightbox. All right, so I'm gonna reduce the intensity a bit, and you see with the Smooth Stronger is a lot faster, but a lot easier to smooth this out. All right, so like I said before, if you have references, this is probably a lot easier or a lot better to create something more realistic, especially if you're doing a specific type of tree, right? Because I don't know, if it is like a Sequoia tree or something like that, you might have like a more pronounced sort of secondary shapes like that. But again, I just want to show you the effect of the brushes. So, all right, so that's the end of setting up this asset, or at least the base mesh of this asset. Now we're going to jump into detailing. So let's go ahead and bring in the brushes. And I'm going to start with some of the simple ones because the brushes come with 3 different categories, or let's say 4 different categories. And all of this is covered in a tutorial that comes with the pack, so that's why I'm not going to spend too much time on this. So the most basic ones are the alpha-based brushes that have the drag rect icon, like these ones right here. So this is what you would expect to get in most of the brushes that you can get online. Again, it's just a complex alpha that has all the details in there. You can click and drag, and that's it. So for example, I can take this knot, double click on that to load that in, and maybe in this area, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on layers, and I'm going to click on a new layer, and I'm going to click and drag, and there we go. Obviously, we need a bit more resolution, so let's actually undo all of this. I'm not going to do a layer. I'm actually going to duplicate the subtool, so I have more options to show you. So let's duplicate that one and hide this, and let's subdivide this a couple more times. So now I have 6 million polygons. This should be enough. Let's go ahead and click and drag now, and we now see all the details. Now, the first tip that I want to give you in terms of sculpting is that once you draw something like this, right, or you do any type of stroke, before you do anything else in terms of sculpting, you can use the Adjust Last, which is in the stroke palette, this one right here. And that will basically increase the strength of whatever you dragged in. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit more contrast in there. Perfect. Now, this doesn't look super realistic, especially because of the base mesh, right? So it's very, very simple bump, right? So I want to maybe edit this a little bit. Let's undo this a bit, go to the lowest subdivision level, and let's use the move brush. And again, this is the reason why I said that at the beginning of the tutorial, that having the primary and secondary shapes is very, very important. So I'm just going to make sure that the knot looks better. All right, something like this I think should be okay. Let's go ahead and use the knot again, click and drag, and let's increase the intensity with the Adjust Last. All right, so that's a little bit more realistic. Perfect. Let's go ahead and use a couple more of these brushes that are very simple. So for instance, we can take, this one is pretty good, the Log Cut 12. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to use this for the bottom. Click and drag, and this is what you get, right? You also get these sort of like extra overflown details here. So if you don't want to have any of that, the simple thing to do would be just to mask an area. So for instance, if I select this mask tool that I have here, it's kind of like the mask pen, just a custom one that is a bit sharper, but you can do the same thing with the mask pen. So I'm going to quickly mask this out. All right, and you can lower the subdivision level to blur that mask. There we go. Go back to the highest subdivision level, and I'm going to click and drag to add this. And also, maybe this is not the one I want. Let me just try a few more, see what works. On something a bit stronger, like this. Let's see another one. This is the fun part. Like, you have a lot of options to try and figure what you want to achieve. All right, so I think this one works. I'm gonna increase the adjust to add more contrast to it. Perfect. So that's working fine. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for here with a different one. Maybe something with less cracks or like thinner cracks, maybe. Let's try this one up. All right, perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and detail the inside of this trunk. Just kind of like a very rough, maybe rotten or burnt wood. So to add details to this area, let's go ahead and bring in some of the brushes. And just to introduce you to a different type of brush that comes with this pack. So I've shown you the most basic ones that are just about clicking and dragging the detail. The other brushes that come with this pack are the ones that have this brush icon with layers. So these ones are really, really fun to play with. I'm going to show you any of these three really would work just fine. So to show you how these brushes or this type of brushes work, I'm going to use this hollowing trim tree, which basically gives you a very practical example of how these brushes work. So the idea is that with this brush now, I can just go ahead and push the geometry quite a bit. And you see I'm just hollowing that tree, right? But this is just a single stroke. So now that I let go, I can click again. And you see it creates kind of like another layer, another level of depth. And I can keep doing that. So this is a new stroke and a new one, and so on and so forth. So that's how you can, hollow out a tree. So I'm going to use this. Let's undo that. I'm going to use this around here to hollow this area. Again, multiple strokes will vary the surface quite a bit. So I think this one is the best way of approaching this area. But you can also, let's say you can continue the crack around here, but I'll do that with a different brush. All right, so you see, this is fairly simple to achieve an interesting look. And I'm doing this, quite rapidly. I would spend a bit more time probably if I'm doing this for a proper asset. Now let's bring back the lightbox, and I'm going to use this one right here, the tree long strong. So this one will give you a much more textury effect. You'll see if I do it here, it has a bit more of details. So I can use that, or actually, I think this one, the tree strong, might give you more details. Yeah. So depending on which one you use, you have a different set of details, really. So let's go with this one for now. And I'm just going to extend this bit. I'm also varying the strength by pressing harder or softer on my tablet. There we go. So here is the cut. I think I'm gonna undo that because I want to make sure that this area is not as thin. So let's go ahead and use the inflate brush first and smooth that out. That way I can sort of push in like that, and it makes it, a bit more realistic. All right, so that's kind of like the idea of that brush. You have 3 of the same to create very similar results. Now this is pretty cool, but I think I want to add a bit more detail inside. So with the lightbox, let's go ahead and use something like the burnt bark, something like this that is pretty rough. I'm going to show you the effect here in a clean area. You see, this is pretty rough, and I just go over the same area with the stroke, and it creates this, very rough, kind of like a burnt wood. So I'll use that to add an extra level of detail, more like surface noise than anything, but it has the reference of a bark, so that's why I would use this one. Okay, let's go ahead and use another one. So you can go to the ones at the end of this pack. So let's say from here, from wood pattern 1 to wood pattern 22, those ones are pretty stylized, but the intention of this is not only to create a stylized kind of like patterns of wood, but once you start layering this up and use them in combination, you can create something very intricate and very realistic as well. I'm going to use this wood pattern 21 and do something like this, changing the brush size as well and just pressing with different strengths. There we go. All right, so it started to create something a lot more interesting than what we had. All right, so the next thing I want to do is show you the application of another layering brush in combination with a normal sculpting brushes. So the sculpting brushes, or when I say sculpting detailing brushes, I mean anything that has the brush. So the simple brush icon, that is a sculpting brush, meaning that you can use a pattern. For example, this hickory strong base. If I double click on that, I can just go ahead and drag to create the effect. Right? Very, very quickly. And we have details already. But the cool thing, obviously, is that you can control the flow of it, right? Depending on the brush that you use, you might get better results. So for example, this hickory flat allows you to add all of these details. So again, there are a lot of different brushes with different effects. It's more about playing with them just to get familiar with the different effects more than anything. But let's go ahead and create something that has kind of like the original bark of the tree, and maybe part of the tree or part of the bark has been stripped out, and you can see the sapwood or the hardwood in a way, like kind of like the softer or inner, cleaner version of the wood that you would see in a tree. I believe it's called sapwood or SAP wood. Yeah, sapwood. So for that, I'm going to do a couple of things. First, I'm going to store a morph target that I have here in my UI, but you can also do the same thing from morph target here. So I just press this button, the store morph target. Right now, we have recorded a state of the model, the current state of the model. The next thing is I'm going to use the mask lasso to define the areas that is going to have the kind of like the exposed wood. So just something random, maybe like that. That should be okay. Maybe use the mask pen as well, just to vary this a little bit. It's not, perfect. The more organic, the better, I think. But I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Just a quick outline changes. Like so. Maybe extend this a bit more. There we go. So basically, this mask area is going to have the bark, and anything that is non-mask at the moment is going to have the kind of like the pattern. So let's go ahead and do that pattern first. And for that, I'm going to use, you know what? Let's go ahead and use these furrows long pattern. I'm going to double click on that one. Large brush. I'm going to test this out. Yeah, I think this will give me a pretty good idea of, the type of wood that I will end up with. So I'm just going to go along the entire trunk of the logo wood to define it. And I think this is one of the most important things to highlight about the brushes, that even though they have, they have alphas, and basically the alphas are the ones that are defining the type of wood, the ability that you have to dictate the flow of the details is kind of like the most powerful thing about this. So I'm gonna try to integrate these furrows with the knot a little bit more. Alrighty. Yeah, so not too bad. In just a few seconds, we have something that looks pretty interesting. Now we can go ahead and combine this effect with something else. So let's go back to the lightbox and let's try some of the more stylized brushes. And you'll see, when I say stylized, I mean the effect that you get is rather stylized compared to the other alphas. But the simplicity of these brushes, or the pattern of these brushes, is by design, right? The idea is that you can combine multiple of these and create something more complex. And having a bunch of these simple brushes allows you to customize the look that you want by combining them differently. So you have a lot more control and ultimately create something that is more unique. So I'm going to use this wood pattern 19. Let's go ahead and let's go with this one. So this is going to add smaller veins of wood, I would say. But as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. there's not a lot of tips or tricks that I can give you aside from using following the flow. I'm gonna exaggerate the patterns here, getting closer to the bark, or the unmask area. Sorry, the mask area. There we go. All right, and just to mention it, because it is included in the pack, I do have an extra brush, which is called the Pablander brush. This is a personal brush that I use for a lot of things. It has nothing to do with the bark and wood brushes. However, I included this brush in the pack just because I think it is very valuable for the type of effects that you want to achieve with these brushes. So I'm going to click on Pablander slash, and this is more like a slash or a very strong than standard brush, but it's really good to create these sort of like cracks, like so. So I'm just going to extend these cracks here. So at the end of the day, these brushes will give you a pretty good starting point for detailing. But I would suggest once you have them, you can just go ahead and take advantage of the suggestion of details. So I'm not really, coming up with new details. I'm just kind of like refining or highlighting some of the details that are already there, generated by the brushes, really. And I think that's one of the key elements of once you have done the base layer of details, you can just go ahead and refine it like that and create something that is very unique and very convincing. All right, so I think that is okay. Now let's go ahead and invert this mask. So holding Control and click once in the canvas. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for this area. But this time I'm going to use a layering brush. So again, let's press the comma key to get into the lightbox. And there are a bunch of these layering brushes, like the ones with this icon, that are really fun. I'm going to go ahead and click on this Hickory Control line layer, just to show you what this does. And you see straight away we get something that it has changed or is displacing the geometry quite a bit. And I would say that's one of the main differences between these layering brushes and the normal sculpting brushes, the ones with just the brush icon. That with the layering brushes, you can actually displace the geometry quite a bit, especially if you do multiple strokes over the same area. Whereas with the sculpting brushes, you are actually adding the details over the surface, so you don't distort the volumes as much. All right, so with this one selected, I'm just going to go ahead and start doing this. And you see, we can achieve a fairly complex and interesting effect quite easily. Now, this brush also has a depth mask. And this is one of the key, I would say, one of the key features or settings of this brush. So I'm not too worried about pushing this all the way down, because the depth of this brush is preventing it from actually affecting the bottom of it. So let me just give you an example. So I can press really hard here, go all the way down, and I know I'm not affecting this part at the bottom. So it's kind of like finishing at the edge, which is exactly what I want for this type of effect, right? All right, let's go ahead and use the flow, or like let's control this with the stroke to figure out how we can combine this protrusion of the tree, or this splitting of the tree. And a funny thing about these brushes is that they kind of look like if you already had these details and then you use the morph brush or something to reveal the details, but in reality, you're building the details. So that's one of the fun things about this brush. All right, so that's pretty good. Let's go ahead and pay attention to these edges a little bit more. So I'm just going to push from this angle up just to make sure that I have all of the details that I need around the edges. There we go. That's pretty good. And the bottom is also looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and add a bit more of a layering effect towards the edge. You see, as I do this, I can press really hard and go over it, and then you'll see it in here. But if you just sort of like stop around the edge, the brush itself will prevent you from adding details in this area, and just because of the angle of it. So just be aware that there are like certain things about the brush that are really useful, but it's good to know how they work so that you know how to take advantage of them. That's what I meant. All right, so another thing, let's go ahead and bring in my Pablander slash, because I want to actually continue the crack here. All right, so I'm going to push this all the way up, and maybe in this area we can hollow the tree as well, or add something in there. Just a reason for having that crack. And the other one doesn't go all the way in, but this is the type of details that I would spend time working a bit more, because they're just fun. So let's say what I meant about adding a hollow in here, or a hollow part of the tree, is using the hollowing layers. I'm going to use this one this time. I'm going to push this in, not too much. Just a hollow area, maybe something that lives in there. Alrighty. So before I clear the mask, what I want to do is I'm going to use my move brush, just the normal move brush, and I'm going to push this out a bit. Well, like not out, but up. And the idea is that it sort of like gives me that effect of the bark being a separate or different layer from the one underneath. I don't want to push it too much because I don't want to distort the polygons. But yeah, you get the idea. This is one of the subtle changes or the subtle details that would make a big difference. Obviously, the edge is not perfect because it's defined by the quick mask that I did, but I can clear the mask now, right? And you see it's a pretty convincing effect, I think, right? And I can just go with any other brush, any other layering brush. And just for the sake of demo, I'm going to use something like this Hickory White Strong Layer 2. And I'm just going to push the edges a little bit more. Actually, before I do that, the reason I saved a morph target is so that I can edit anything that I don't need. In this case, I'm pretty happy with the result. So I'm just going to delete my morph target. I'm going to delete here. And I'm going to store the morph target again. So that way, if I just go over, let's say, the wood pattern, I can go ahead and clean that up. So I just want to refine the edges a little bit so that it's not as, as manufactured. I want to make sure that it looks organic enough. All right, so now if, for example, you went over, let's say this area right here, you can use the morph brush. So I'm going to use the morph brush. This one comes with ZBrush, obviously. I can go ahead and go back to kind of like the original pattern a little bit. So it's kind of like erasing that, what you just did, just in the areas that you don't need it, right? So again, I would spend a bit more time doing this, but I want to cover kind of like the workflow a little bit. So there we go. So this is a pretty convincing effect, I think. And it's fairly simple. And I only use maybe 5 brushes altogether. And remember, you have about 115 brushes to create something very unique. So there you have it. That's kind of like how you can use some of the brushes and what you can expect from it. All right, so just to wrap up this tutorial, I'm going to show you one more effect just to illustrate the efficiency of these brushes if I were to just actually work without explaining the steps. So I'm going to use the one that I haven't touched, right? And I'm going to load something, one of my favorites, which is a sculpting brush. So this one right here, the Sequoia Control Pattern Maker. So this one is one of my favorites, even though it's not a layering brush, which ultimately are the coolest brushes of this pack. This brush is pretty cool. And the reason I like it so much is because I'll show you what it does. It's a pretty strong pattern, and as you can see, it doesn't continue like this cut right here, or this crevice is not continuous, right? So you have one cut, then you don't have a cut, then you have a cut. And the reason I built this brush this way is because I was working on a bonsai tree asset type of thing. So there was a lot of twisting and contortion, and this one allows you to, simulate that. So let's undo that. And just for the sake of demo again, I'm gonna go ahead and do this with multiple strokes, like so, and then continue like that. So kind of like twisting those details around the tree. So a very convincing pattern in just a few seconds, really. And I probably need more resolution. Oh, hang on. That's why. Let me undo all of that. It's a bit of a waste because this brush has a lot of details. I want to make sure I have enough details. So 6 million polygons. Again, one single motion. This is the same stroke, just going over the same area a couple of times. Then let go, do the same thing here. Same stroke, haven't let go of my click, let's say. And let's continue from here. So I would say just a few strokes to generate the base. And then of course you can use other brushes or any other sculpting brushes, let's say the damp standard brush, to refine some of the crevices of this and things like that. But generally speaking, to build something like this, it would take quite a bit of time, I would say. And this allows you to get the base right quickly, and then you can obviously refine it as much as you want to. But yeah, so this gives you an idea of another brush. This is one of my favorites in the pack, precisely because of the kind of like the flow that it gives me. And I can just do this. Let's just create a note here very quickly. So there we go. All right, so I guess the point that I was trying to make is that because you have this sort of ability to control the flow of the details just by directing your stroke, like you would with any sculpting brushes. That's the reason I call them sculpting brushes with details. You have something that looks a bit more customized, more bespoke, based on the type of asset that you want to create, really. So in that sense, this is what I think makes these brushes quite unique and interesting to work with. So I'm gonna leave a snapshot here, Shift S, and then switch back to the other one, just to show you the difference, like the drastic difference between two types of, let's say, trees or assets done with different brushes at different speeds, I would say, and that's about it. So as a quick recap, in the brush pack, you will find the sculpting brushes, which is the one that I used for that asset just before. So the ones with this icon right here. You have the layering brushes, the one that have this icon with multiple layers. Those are the ones that will build volume a lot faster, and they're really cool. Then you also have the very simple click and drag brushes, mostly for the kind of like the knots and lock cuts, that sort of thing. There are a couple more that you can add. For example, this crack alpha. Let's just do this one here. On this guy, it's a pretty interesting sort of like cut. Probably not the best one for this type of asset, but you can add it in there. So those are the very simple one. So 3 different brushes. Now the final 2 brushes that are part of a separate category, I just included them because they're fun, but don't expect them to give you a fantastic result straight away. It's just more like I would say exploratory or discovery brushes. So these two brushes right here, you see they have like different icons, and also the icon here is different. So these ones are kind of like a fun to play with. I'm gonna just show you the effect of this one. And let's actually duplicate this and isolate this, and I'm gonna go back in time. Now, this brush was kind of like a happy mistake as I was developing other brushes, but it works a lot better if you have a tubular shape. So for an asset like this would work fine. And the idea is that with the spray stroke, you can just click from the top to the bottom. So that's kind of like your stroke. And there you go. It builds the asset like this. So let's do a couple more. You see, depending on how you apply it, it will just change the pattern, and depending on how hard you press as well. So the reason I included is because, you can discover like very interesting patterns fairly quick. Like I said, it's not gonna be as controlled and perfect as the other ones, but it's a fun one to play with, and it's fairly simple. So you can just do something like this. Maybe you can actually click on back face masking if you don't want to affect the back of the tree. And this is nothing to do with the brush itself. You can do that from the brush palette, auto masking, and click on backface masking for any brush. So that way, when you do this, you're not affecting the back, right? So anyway, just a fun brush to, to discover things. You might have something that looks cool for a creature like this, maybe the hands of a creature or something, or a horn maybe. And this is your base mesh. And if you had stored a morph target, you can just go ahead and clean it up as well, and then use something like the Pablander slash or similar to just go through the model and make it more intentional than what this brush gives you. But yeah, hopefully you get the idea. It's a fun pack of brushes. That's what I would say. It is very helpful for not just creating bark and wood. Like I show you with the character that I created. Those details on this character were created 100% using these brushes. So it's not just about creating wood or bark. You can use them for creature skin details and all sorts of different things. So hopefully you found this video interesting. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. And if you make something cool with these brushes, please tag me at Pablander in social media. I would love to see the result or the application of these brushes. All right, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Cheers.